Discipline is a process. Someone asked me recently about discipline. They messaged me, and they didn't say it explicitly, but they were basically suggesting that they might be overweight and have trouble controlling their diet. And he said, I read this book of yours, and I read that chapter on discipline, and he had a very specific question about what do I do when the food is just so appealing, and then my brain turns off and I go on autopilot and I just eat, and then it's like I wake up from a dream like, what have I done? And he basically describes a very individualized experience of breaking discipline, failing at the juncture of decision when he knows he wants to do one decision and he does the other decision. And I didn't tell him this in my reply because it just didn't feel appropriate at the time, but I felt like he hadn't read the chapter deeply because I covered this. But perhaps sometimes when we're reading things, we're looking for not just an answer to a question, but we're looking for a key to a lock that might not even exist. We're looking for a shortcut, a silver bullet. We're looking for some type of way to just get the discipline magically, or to trick ourselves into being disciplined, or maybe a way to be disciplined without actually feeling the pains of becoming a disciplined mind, a disciplined person. And the reality of discipline is that even though in this particular case, the one asking me the question was talking about struggles with food and seeing a delicious meal before him and almost waking up consciously after he eats, like he lost control, he lost a part of himself. The individualized experience of your breaks in discipline, your breaks in self-control, do not actually change the fact that the discipline core is the same. The root, the essence of having discipline is the same. And so at a certain point, whatever that thing is that you want, that you know on one level is bad for you, will reveal to you the split nature of the self. And everyone has this nature. It's just part of the human experience. It's part of the human creation. We have a split nature. We have a lower self, an animal self. And it has an irrational desire, a want, a fear. It has absolutely no logic. It's purely sensorial. It's a feeling. It's a drive. It's an inclination. It's built into your nervous system, and you can't get rid of it fully. But there's another part of you that is awake spiritually. It's awake consciously. And it can have something that we could possibly term metacognition. In other words, not just cogniting, not just thinking, but being aware of your thinking about your thinking, or awareness of your awareness. And it's through that awareness of your awareness that you can begin to disassociate yourself from the one thought, which is like, as the person was describing in their message to me, basically, I want the cookie. I want the cake. I want the delicious piece of chicken, or whatever it is that he's after. I want that. And then witness the experience as if you are outside of yourself. Because in a manner of speaking, you are outside of yourself, because there's multiple selves. So that you can inhabit one self or the other self at any given moment. You could be in the self of the lower self and completely locked into a desire, or completely locked into a fear. And like an animal, you're basically on autopilot. You're not really in control. You can also be in the portion of the self where you're looking at the past failure of your disciplined failure and wondering what happened. So you're back into the higher self, even if not fully, where you can start to look at that moment in time where you broke and go, why did I break? Because when you're in the moment of breaking, you don't have that reflection. When you're in that moment of the lower self taking control, you're not experiencing metacognition. You're not aware of your awareness, you get trapped in the lower awareness and it becomes purely a sensorial experience. Like, you know, as natural as a river just flowing between rocks. It's not conducting itself, it's just going with a flow. And that flow is animalic. That flow is whatever your nervous system informs you is best for your survival at that time. You're just going with it. And that's a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But the root experience has a singularity to it. It has a similitude in which we lose our awareness of our awareness and we just go with our desires and our fears and that balance between them. In this case, the message I received had to do with food, but this could be the same experience that you feel when you're training as a martial artist at that edge of fatigue. You're really, really tired and you're supposed to push through, and your lower self is telling you to preserve your energy and avoid the pain and avoid the discomfort. And there's another part of you that you have to learn to develop, which is that small awareness of your awareness. And the more you feed that portion of yourself, the stronger it gets, the more robust it becomes, and the more you can rely on it and put your consciousness into it, extracting yourself from the lower self and bringing yourself into the higher self. And it becomes a practice in and of itself, where you can get better at the skill of pulling yourself out of yourself. Pulling yourself out of yourself. And it reminds me of the poet Maulana Rumi. He said, "Be like melting snow, wash yourself of yourself." A very beautiful line, originally in Persian by the great sage who understood that the layers of the self permit us to move from one place in ourself to another place in ourself. So it's as if we're traveling. And the more often a road is taken, the more often a path is traveled, the deeper that road gets. Just like in nature, if you have an army walk in a straight line, it's going to become a strong trail. But if you leave it alone, the bushes will grow over and the trail disappears. And there's a similarity in the sense that we have to walk the trail from lower self to higher self with regularity. And going back to the man who sent me the message, I told him this basically in a number of words, that you need to practice self-control with things that seem completely unrelated to what you're personally struggling with. So he was kind of expressing a struggle with food. And it seems totally unrelated, but jumping into an ice bath and resisting the urge to get out will build that path between lower self and higher self, and you will get better at the skill of bringing yourself out of the lower self and pushing yourself into the higher self, where you become in control of the lower self, which is like an animal. And analogistically, you become like a rider pulling at the reins of the lower self, which is like the beast. So ice baths have nothing really to do with your diet. Well, perhaps metabolically they do. But the real carryover is just you did something that engages your lower self, the nervous system, the instinct, and then you practiced the feeling of overriding it. Practiced the experience of becoming aware of a feeling as if it's a different person, even though it's still you. You are like the melting snow, washing yourself of yourself. You could say the same thing about strength training. Everyone knows who works in strength training. It's the last couple reps when it starts to burn that really give you the results. And your lower self will start to speak up. Take it easy, you did enough, you did fine, you'll have some results. There's another part of you that knows, actually, I'm supposed to push until the very end. And the end is a negotiable area where you will find very interesting conversations within yourself, as if it were two people. The lower self making an eloquent argument towards rest and comfort, and the higher self making sometimes an eloquent argument towards perseverance and pushing through and accepting the pain, because the reward for the pain, more often than not, is far greater than the pain that we're trying to avoid. And we see this as a metaphysical principle basically throughout nature. There's a relationship between being able to endure pain, delay pleasure, and get greater reward, both in the macrocosmic sense of this spiritual experience that we die from, and then we are reborn and we get a reflection of what we do here, but even in the short-term sense, the way that a farmer must wait for the harvest and not disturb the crop. You have to have the patience to reap the reward at the end of the season. And the more times we do this as a martial artist, or even just as a spiritual entity, the better we get at it, and it becomes a practice. So you practice painting, you get better at painting. You practice handwriting, you get better at handwriting. You practice martial arts, you get better at martial arts. If you practice self-control, you get better at self-control. And so if you're struggling, like the person who sent me this message, in one area of self-control, a useful methodology, a technique, a path, a strategy to help fortify your discipline levels, to help strengthen your ability to say no to yourself, a way to practice being that snow that washes itself of itself, is to find something seemingly unrelated that probably has a health benefit or maybe an intellectual benefit. It could be meditation, it could be ice baths, it could be getting in shape and sprinting, it could be fixing your handwriting, it could be doing anything that you find engages a part of you that you have to examine that conversation between the lower self and the higher self. And every little win that you have in that arena, where you felt the inclination to stop and then you persevered, you felt the inclination to break, but you kept going, you felt the inclination to give in, but you said no. The more times you do that, the more you've walked the path from taking yourself from the lower self to the higher self, and a path that is commonly walked upon becomes a strong road. And on a strong road, you will be able to take that discipline, that core root, self-control that you've built within yourself, and utilize it on the things that you're struggling with. And so there becomes a point where a disciplined person can be disciplined as a general feature, not because he was disciplined in everything right away, but because they were disciplined in enough things for enough time that the character habit started to bleed over into other aspects of their life. So this is something that we need to inculcate in ourselves as martial artists and just as human beings. We have to have discipline. We have to be able to hold our tongue back when we're angry. We have to be able to wake up even though we're sleepy, when it's the right thing to do, when it's time for prayer or time to get to work or time to do whatever it is that we've committed ourselves to doing. We have to be able to say no when we've eaten enough and it's time to stop eating. We have to be able to follow through with our workouts, because we know that it's the little drops in the bucket that add up to the large, heavy weight of who we are over time. We only get, one day at a time. And so everything that you do every day over time has an aggregate effect. And it's discipline of doing the things, even when you don't want to do them, that can give you those long-term benefits that we all want. We all want to feel good. We want to feel healthy. We want to feel at peace. We want to avoid misfortune and stuff. And that is related to our discipline. And so building discipline, not just as a blanket statement, be disciplined. It's easy to say that, but to think of it as a practice, as a strategy, as something that we're doing intentionally in our lives as martial artists, something that we're doing intentionally as, followers of a path, something that we're doing intentionally as a skill, something that we're actually thinking, can I look at myself and rate the quality of my discipline? Can I look at myself and rate which aspects do I have discipline and which aspects do I not have discipline? And where am I good at discipline in the sense that I can identify those things, maybe do them more often, or identify some things that I'm not doing that I could be doing that don't bother me that much, that would increase the level of familiarity my internal experience has with going from the low to the high, going from the animal self to the higher self. And the more often we do this, the better we're going to get out of it. And so this has to be a foundational practice of every martial artist.